Hi, I'm Aki Kano, the president of the American Artists Professional League. Recently, I had the pleasure of meeting up with Frederick Brosen, master cityscape watercolorist, and I got to interview him. I've always admired how Rick captures time and atmosphere in his paintings. His cityscapes feel both timeless and deeply personal, full of light, memory, and quiet reflection. What I love most is the way he brings together drawing and watercolor so seamlessly. There's a real dialogue between structure and emotion in his work. In our conversation, we talk about his process, what continues to inspire him, and how watercolor remains a medium of endless discovery and joy. Why do you paint cityscapes, and what is that inspired from?
From the time I was a young boy, I was out in my neighborhood often, looking at the classic architecture of the Upper West Side. And my father had been in real estate, and if you took a walk with him, he knew not only the historical history of the buildings, but he knew the anecdotal histories. He knew who lived there. He would say, "Ricky, there was a brothel there. Ricky, there was a murder here." He knew all these stories, and so he made the buildings intriguing. He animated them. So when I would walk around and I would look at a facade, I would always think that the door was the cover of a book, and you were looking at a story. And there was a mystery to it that always intrigued me, that I think has been the subject of my work for the rest of my life.
Why do you paint with watercolors? Why do you love the medium so much?
I discovered watercolor in my second year of graduate school at Pratt back in the 70s. And although many people had warned me that it was a particularly difficult medium, I found that I had a natural affinity for it, that I had a natural ability. So my MFA thesis show was the first body of watercolors I did. And my professors at Pratt all said to me, "Wait a minute, you can do this? You shouldn't do anything else. You're a natural watercolorist." So very quickly, right out of graduate school, I was able to get a major gallery. And
Which gallery was that?
It was a gallery called Stamfley Gallery, which was on 77th and Madison upstairs. And it was a great gallery. They represented Claudio Bravo, they represented Brancusi.
Wow.
So I was, a 27, 28-year-old kid, and the gallery was nice enough to take me on. And in 1983, I had my first show, and I was still in my 20s, and the show sold out. So I was early reinforced with what I was doing. And then, significantly, in 1994, I got into into Forum Gallery. And Forum Gallery at that time was considered the best realist gallery in the country. And I was 40 years old, and everybody said, "You're at Forum Gallery, you've made it big." So I decided, once I got into Forum, to really deepen and expand the work I was doing.
I see.
Because suddenly I was going to be showing with some of the best oil painters in the country, not just watercolorists. And I wanted to be able to hold my own. So I think the opportunity the Forum afforded me at that point in my life really spurred me to deepen and expand the work I had been able to do.
When you say hold your own, in what respect?
I wanted to be able to have my work on the wall with some of the best oil painters in the country and not look second rate. I wanted to be able, not that I thought I would be a dominant figure in the gallery, I knew I wouldn't be, but that I could just hold my own with those very, very accomplished painters. That was my goal. That I looked like I belonged.
Did you achieve this goal?
And yeah, I think that spur was responsible for my work going from being good to being much better.
Who are some of your favorite artists, living and from past history?
Well, I started going to Europe when I was 18, and was lucky enough to stumble into the Rijksmuseum and fell in love with Dutch 17th century painting. That was the first period I really fell in love with.
Wow.
And I loved the technical excellence and the humanity, the accessibility of it. The Dutch artists, the 17th century Dutch artists, never proselytized, never looked down at you. They, almost like you're going into a room and they're saying, hey, come and have a drink with us. So I felt a certain kind of brotherhood with those artists, and I always loved the fact that they were great, but they were accessible. And that kind of formed my own feeling about my work, that I wanted to aspire. I knew I could never be on their level. They're different kinds of artists. But I decided if I took watercolor and I took cityscape, let's see how far I could go with it.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that's important is you realize your limitations as an artist. I knew early on I wasn't a Caravaggio or a Rembrandt. I couldn't do anything. So I picked my spot very early, by the time I was in my early 20s, and decided I was going to see how excellent I could get in that one arena. And I learned that from the little Dutch masters, not Vermeer, not Rembrandt, but all those great artists, the Adrian Courts, the Adrian van der Veldes, the Adrian, I'm missing the name now, but those minor masters who perfected a very specific thing. They weren't as great as the major masters, but on their own, in the narrow focus that they chose, they were as good as anybody who ever painted. And I was determined to become the best artist in watercolor and cityscape that I could become. And contemporary artists, there are certainly artists like Rackstraw Downs, an artist who shows at Forum with me now, Rance Jones.
Yes.
But there are a number. Rick Schaefer is somebody who does enormous drawings in a kind of Northern Renaissance style that I admire very much. But there are many artists, but still, I would say people like Caspar David Friedrich, like Vermeer, of course, like Chardin, and then the early English watercolorists, the Boningtons, the Cotmans, and of course Turner, everybody knows.
Of course.
But those were the artists who taught me the technique. Nobody, when I was studying in the 70s, nobody taught the kind of art that now many ateliers teach. There was no Florence Academy. There was no, so largely I was self-taught by the masters I studied. And
so how would you go about studying them? Through books and through museums?
I always felt that you had to go see the original work, to see the texture, the scale, the application of paint. So I started from the age of 18 going to Europe almost every year, and specifically to go to museums. And I'd go to museums during the day and split my time drawing outside. So from the time I was about 19 till I was in my late 30s, I chiefly worked outside. And that's where I really learned to draw.
That makes sense, yeah.
But I still say you learn the most from other artists. I think you learn more from other artists than you do from nature or photography or any other source, or imagination. So I've learned more technically from the masters I've studied than any other source.
So what advice do you have for artists that want to work in realist style and watercolor?
I think the big difference in one of the fallacies I think that some artists buy into is thinking that excellent technique is an end in itself. Excellent technique is just a vehicle. You have to stay true to your intuition and try and develop a unique sensibility that you learn these techniques to best express. The technique is the vehicle, but it's the vision in the work that separates good work from great work. What makes great work? Great work is a combination. Great technique is a given. You have to be a master of your craft. But then, what do you do with it? I look like, for instance, Caspar David Friedrich just had a major retrospective. He, in his
At the
work
Metropolitan Museum.
at the Metropolitan, I saw you there.
I remember that.
And Friedrich, you can feel Friedrich's spirit and his passion in every stroke he made. He is completely authentic. There's not a false note in Friedrich. So it's his passion and his authenticity that I respond to as much as the technique. One of the dangers of contemporary painting is that social media has a huge impact on
right.
what we do. And what you have to do is separate yourself from judging yourself against all the social media feed that you get, and discover your own sensibility. And it's harder now than it used to be because there are so many influences coming at you all at once. So trying to find something that you uniquely have to say is one of the most difficult challenges for an artist.
But you have always felt that cityscapes, painting, urban buildings, and different details of the city was something that was a passion for you.
Because from the time I was a boy, I would stand in front of these older buildings, and the doors of those older buildings seemed like the covers of a book. They seemed like the stories inside were what fascinated me. There was a mystery. There was something that you could see, but you couldn't really hold on to in those books, in those facades. So I found that I was mystified and intrigued by the stories that those places contained. One of the basic tenets of romantic painting is yearning. That which is seen but can't be reached. It is especially strong in the romantic painters, and Friedrich and that period of painters. So in a facade, it's what's behind the door. In a cityscape, it's what's around the corner.
Yeah.
In Friedrich, Friedrich invented the view through the window. And there was that great show at the Metropolitan of just views through the window that Friedrich invented. Many artists don't realize that he invented that motif. And it's a unique romantic motif because the view out the window, you are viewing what you would like to get to, but you can't get to.
So it's symbolic.
So yeah, and what it creates is a sense of yearning for that which you see but can't quite reach.
I see.
And I think that's something that I think I've always aimed to try and capture in my work.
In order to achieve that, though, for the technical part, what is your process in painting from concept to the finished piece?
I'm two artists in when I paint. There is first of all, because I spend so much time on my images, I choose very, very carefully what I choose to paint. One of the things, I'm always culling my photographs and looking through things. Usually when I find a view that I like, I might take 20 different photographs of it. I might sketch on site. I get basically almost a billboard of images of it. And I'll distill from a series of images, elements of each one to put in the final painting. I'll extract. So there's a lot of manipulation. I mean, even in this complex piece that you saw, this drawing.
Yep.
If I showed you the photographs I used, there's an enormous amount of simplification in it, believe it or not.
Wow.
There's a lot of elimination.
And you obviously don't trace your photos or use projections.
I use a point system where I measure, I put points down that I connect, and I learned that system from Turner. That's the way Turner drew.
Oh.
Turner drew not using orthogonals and perspective points,
Yes.
using dots that he connected. And it's a very good method because you can correct the dots. See, if you build orthogonals and perspective points and you run them very early in the painting, if you want to change them, it's hard to erase. I use hard graphite. But if you use points and you realize that the perspective is off, you can just change the point before you put the lines in. So a point system is a way that you don't mar the paper, you can make corrections without having to erase a lot.
So in the beginning stages, you have points, not lines
Points
connecting the
with
points.
the big boxes of
Yeah.
what I'm drawing. Even if I were to use visual aids, if I started tracing or something like that, I would still use a point system from the tracing and then hand draw, because there's something about the hand drawn line that has an expressiveness that the tracing doesn't have.
It captures your kind of like your emotion for
Yeah,
your subjects better than a tracing.
Yeah, and if you study, so when I teach, as you know, Aki, I teach a lot.
Yes.
And so one of the things, what artists do I teach from? I don't teach from post-photography art. I teach pre-photography art.
Right.
I look at drawings by Fragonard, by Friedrich, by Ang for figure work. So those are artists who had to interpret form onto a two-dimensional surface pre-photography. So if you learn to draw from them, you learn an expressive way of drawing, an interpretive way of drawing, and then if you want to use photography, you can. But first you should learn that foundation. Your drawing will always be more expressive and more uniquely you. If every great artist that I've studied, if you look at their drawings are a calligraphy, and they're unique. They're a unique handwriting. So if you really get familiar with, let's say you study Canaletto's drawings or a Fragonard, the strokes are different. The interpretation of form, the concepts of form are all the same, but the specific interpretation is always different. So what you learn from those artists is not how realistic they are, but how interpretive they are. And if you learn that, you've learned a great secret of art. Realism, Vermeer is the great romantic. Vermeer is not a realist. Vermeer is a romantic.
Interesting, yeah.
Vermeer had 11 children. He lived with his mother-in-law, Maria Thins, and his wife, Katerina, and 11 kids. He was always broke. He lived off his mother-in-law. She supported him. And he was always under a lot of pressure, and his household had to be cacophonous. It had to be filled with children and toys and noise. So his paintings of these silent, introspective, poetical, single women in interiors are a fantasy. They were a fantasy for him. They were a romantic recreation of the life that
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they weren't his real life. They were his imagined life. When you work very realistically, the danger is always that people will say, I can't believe you painted every fucking brick. Pardon me. But that's not the message.
That's the means to...
That's just the vehicle.
Right.
It's much more meaningful when somebody tells me that they were moved by a work of mine. Being amazed by technique and being moved by work are completely different emotions. So,
interesting, yeah.
So you can be amazed by a painting but not moved by it. I want to be moved. I want my wheels to be turned when I look at art.
You want to feel the emotions. And
I want to feel the spirit behind the technique. So that's where greatness lies. When the way something's painted and the emotional passion behind it are fused. So the way an artist paints and the feeling they're trying to achieve are the same thing. When you have that fusion of emotion and technique, then you have the potential to do something special.
I would really like to thank Rick for taking the time to speak with me. Hearing about his life experiences and reflections on the world of fine art was an absolute pleasure. Rick will be the juror of awards at this year's AAPL Grand National Exhibition at the Salmagundi Club in New York City. The show will run from November 18th to December 5th, and I invite all of you to come see the amazing work that has been selected for this year's show. On behalf of Rick Brosen and the board of AAPL, I would like to say thank you for watching.